Welcome to Women Mastering Midlife, where we dive deep into the rich complexities of womanhood in our middle years. I'm your host, Victoria Bird, pharmacist, certified women's health coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Whether you're navigating perimenopause, thriving in menopause, or mastering midlife's many transitions, this is your weekly dose of expert guidance, compassionate support, and a judgment-free space to explore it all. So get cozy, hit that play button, and let's rewrite the narrative around this remarkable stage from being something to dread into a beautiful transition. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 1, our first episode of the Women Mastering Midlife podcast. I was thinking about a layout. I was processing how I wanted to deliver this information to women. And I didn't want to just focus on one niche. I didn't want to narrow down what our topic of conversations would be. I wanted to really be able to get into lots of different topics because women in our 40s, we're so much more complex than just one simple thing. And this is also selfishly my opportunity to have conversations with experts and other women. And it's going to be my own personal growth journey. So you're on a ride with me when you hear an expert guest or a topic of conversation or a book club or a journal club. You're going to be hearing not only what my community wants to learn about, but also something that I'm either passionate about or something that I can't wait to share. So I was thinking about ways to lay the land, right? And the first thing that came to mind is I have a monthly newsletter, and one of those things that I have every month on that is the chat on the mat section. And that's conversations you might have with your girlfriends before yoga class. So what this offers for my readers is a chance to hear like the latest hot topics or just things that you would talk about. And so it's going to be not an expert conversation per se, but a woman who's an expert in living her life, a woman who has gone through something that other women could benefit learning from. And it could also be a conversation with me about a hot topic in midlife health. So we'll dig a little bit every now and then into a research article or a book. I will also be using my 7 pillars of menopause health. Those are the foundations that I use when I work as a menopause coach with clients. So I use my prescriptive care of pharmacy background. And I also come at things with a holistic approach because I'm an integrative women's health coach. So taking what I've learned as an integrative women's health coach and what I've learned as a pharmacist, I am using these 7 pillars to encompass, am I hitting all the aspects of a woman's life? Because in order to give women a true vision of what their health should look like, they require some guidance in all different avenues, not just necessarily hormone replacement or nutrition or movement, but they're part of them. So one of the things that we talk about will be stress, sleep, environment, hormones will be in there, movement, careers, relationships. So we'll really dive into lots of different topics. And I hope that you listen every week. And I also hope that this creates a library of information for you moving forward. So now that I've spent a few minutes breaking down what all these podcasts are going to look like, I want to come here today and have the first chat on the mat conversation solo and share with you my menopause journey. Because if I am going to ask women to come onto this podcast, be vulnerable, share a part of themselves, I need to do it myself. And I think also there's this disconnect sometimes between what we display on social media and what we display professionally and who we are as people. So this will give you it's a touch of humanity for this podcast. And I hope that there's parts of this that you can relate to, or there's parts of this that you could say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry she didn't learn this earlier. But we'll start when I turned 40, or I was about to turn 40, actually. So my 39th year, I decided I was going to go into 40 having it all figured out. I was going to be in the best shape of my life. I was going to start working toward finding something for myself outside of being a stay-at-home mom. I have been Mrs. Dr. Bird for the last 13 years, and I have been a mom that's not working for the last 13 years. And I was realizing that these girls that I drive around and feed and clothe and take to all the appointments and manage the house, they will be getting older soon and they will be needing me less. And so I wanted to find something for myself. And that's when I decided going back to retail pharmacy just didn't make sense. My schedule in the pharmacy locks you into a building. If there isn't a pharmacist present, you can't pick up your prescriptions. So I thought retail pharmacy is not where I'm going to go right now because my kids still need me. If goodness sakes, one of them needs to be picked up sick from school, it's either I close a pharmacy or my husband shuts down his OR day. Neither of those are a good option. So what I used to do wasn't going to fit with who I am now. So I looked into health coaching because I realized it's something I could do from the comfort of my home. I could maintain my schedule and I could learn a lot about different dietary theories and different holistic ways to approach lifestyle. And then I just went into this rabbit hole. I'm like, I'm going to be an integrative women's health coach. I signed up and started taking a course at the Integrative Women's Health Institute, which I highly recommend. Such a vast amount of knowledge that comes from that course. And so I thought I'm going to open my own integrative women's health coach practice. And then March 2020 came. My birthday is July 16th, 1980. So my 40th birthday was July 16th, 2020. And if you guys can't remember where we were in July of 2020, I will briefly remind you that at least in our magical state, we were pretty much still in lockdown. And so the trip of a lifetime that my family and I were going to take to celebrate my birthday had been canceled. And the idea of a party wasn't going to happen. And I recognized that I turned 40, not in the best shape of my life because my favorite gym was shut down. And I was sitting on my backside on a bar stool next to kids, trying to get them to remote learn. I was starting to have pain from a back injury due to pretty much stagnation. The more you sit and don't move, the less muscle you have. And therefore, it just all went. I hurt my back carrying stuff I shouldn't have. And so I started to feel like I was falling apart. And I remember sitting on my 40th birthday thinking, gosh, I'm supposed to have so much life left. And I don't even know. I just felt really lost. Let's just put it that way. I just felt really lost. And I started to recognize in myself that there were things changing internally. And I couldn't put a finger on it. I couldn't describe it. I couldn't go on to Google or WebMD and try to figure out what's going on. But I just knew something was off. And the first thing that hit me was brain fog. I had horrible brain fog to the point where I remember multiple times being in cars with my husband and my kids saying, I think I have early onset Alzheimer's. I really do. I think maybe I should get tested. I was reading books about dementia and women's brain health and just not remembering where I put my keys, not being able to come up with words to finish my sentence. I was the birthday queen. I was the one who handled the birthday cards and the gifts. And all of a sudden I couldn't remember a birthday or anniversary. I just remember that feeling. You go into a room, you're like, what? Why am I here? What am I doing? Just constantly. And I thought, is this the beginning of the end? Am I going to be, if you watched Grey's Anatomy, like Meredith Grey's worst nightmare? Here it comes. The brain fog was pretty debilitating. And then came erratic periods. I was on an oral contraceptive pill that I didn't take the placebos, so I didn't have a cycle. And I needed it for medical reasons. So I was told by my OB-GYN. And I had crazy bleeding. And I was like, I have not had a period in 10 years. Why is this happening? So I decided to go off of the oral contraceptive pill, talk to my doctor, and it could be that you're possibly starting to have some symptoms of perimenopause. And I looked at her and I thought, I'm 40. It's too young. That's not me. I'm not 50. I'm not an old lady. Why are you talking to me about this? And she's like, well, just keep an eye on it. You could always go back on the pill if you didn't have any trouble with it. But the irregular periods, they come with that. They come with coming off the pill. They come with the beginning of perimenopause. So just, it's fine. Just write it out. No big deal. And then came the 3 a.m. wake-ups with crippling anxiety. And I've always been kind of an anxious person, but this was next level anxiety. This was being anxious to the point where I'm sure my husband thought I was going crazy because I was worrying about things that didn't make sense. I was needy, extremely needy. I was emotionally unhinged. It's a good word for it. And at 3 a.m. every night, I'd be awake worrying about my dementia, my kids, my marriage. Do we have enough money in our bank account to pay our bills? Which, by the way, I knew exactly how many dollars were in our bank account, and I knew we could pay our bills. So these irrational, crazy fears would creep into my mind and get me to the point where I was thinking, should I see somebody about this anxiety? And it was newfound. It wasn't something that had been there all along. This was like all of a sudden I was just anxious all the time. And then crept in, waking up at 3 a.m. with anxious thoughts, soaking wet. And I thought, okay, now I'm like soaking through my pajamas a couple nights a week. What in the world is going on? And so I started to do some research because I love to dig into this health stuff, especially now. And I realized that I was, for sure, in the beginning of perimenopause. I was definitely in need of some help. And I wanted to get the night sweats under control. I wanted to get the anxiety and the brain fog under control. And I had been reading about hormone replacement therapy. And I had decided that bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, so micronized progesterone and an estradiol patch, were what I wanted. Now, I, having a pharmacy background, know the differences in the chemical compound structures of estrogens and progesterones. And I wanted to supplement with the compound that fits, that's exactly the same as what my body makes. The oral contraceptive pills, they are synthetic hormones. They're not chemically the same. They don't work on the body the same way, but they create this cycle in your body that basically your body thinks you're pregnant is what it is. It's higher doses of hormones and it stops ovulation. And so I wanted to go in and ask for hormone replacement therapy. So I went into my OB-GYN and I was telling her all my symptoms. She's like, let's get some blood work. It's like, okay. So I go get my blood work, go back. So first of all, the medical assistant came in and she's, you're not in menopause. Your hormone, like everything on your blood work looked fine. You can talk to the doctor, but I don't see any reason why you should think you're in menopause. Now, I never said I was in menopause. Being in menopause means that you've had 12 months without a period. I was having a period I would go 40 days and then it would go 12 days and then it would go 22 days and then it would go 50 days. And it was so erratic and so heavy and so abnormal. I knew I wasn't in menopause, but I knew based on what I had read that I was in perimenopause and wanted hormones. So the doctor comes in and she's, yeah, your blood work looks fine. I don't see that you're in any kind of perimenopause, menopause state. I can give you a prescription for trazodone for your sleep. I'll give you an SSRI for your anxiety. And if you really want something, I can add some progesterone that you take for 10 days of your cycle. This is not what I was hoping for. And I feel like the more I talk to women, the more clients I talk to, the more women who message me, the feeling of complete deflation when you walk out of a doctor's office and they don't listen to you is not only exasperating, but very common. And if I had a quarter for every woman who told me that they came out of their doctor's office being told, here's an antidepressant, try some breath work, maybe go to therapy, I would be a billionaire. So I know I'm not alone, but I felt very alone in the beginning because my husband is an orthopedic cancer surgeon. He doesn't do gyne. He doesn't know menopause care. And so he's not the best resource. And I was young when I would talk about this with women who were experiencing it. They're like, you're too young. That's not your problem. And so I just felt very alone. I felt very lonely trying to figure out what was going on. So then after that, I decided that wasn't good enough. I was talking to a woman at my gym when things started to open back up. And now, mind you, this was a year and a half of just feeling like nobody was listening to me. So I went to my local gym and I was talking to the woman behind the counter, and she said, oh, you need hormones. You should go to this clinic and see this provider and get yourself on some hormones. So I made an appointment and I went in, and this healthcare provider, she sat down in a chair and looked eye to eye with me and said, tell me what's going on. And I almost cried, and I might cry now with the feelings of just complete overwhelm that I was being heard. And she said, we're going to start you on an estradiol patch. We're going to give you some micronized progesterone. You're going to use it for 3 to 6 months, and we're going to reevaluate where you are and see if it's helping, see what your levels are like, see if you're having residual side effects or symptoms from the menopause transition. But this is going to help you. And I walked out of there, mind you, 45 minutes later. My first appointment was long. And we talked about everything. We talked about the weight gain. We talked about the fatigue. I talked about how I would get aches and pains, but more than that's like the aches, the fatigue was so insane. I'm an active person. Was an athletic person where I was doing the gym and doing the do, and my nutrition was great. She's like, I looked at your blood work and your hemoglobin A1C is great, which means you're not pre-diabetic. Your cholesterol is fantastic. So I know you're eating well, taking care of yourself. Your hormone levels are fine, but that's not indicative of perimenopause. Your follicle stimulating hormone isn't high enough to show you're in menopause, but we don't need to talk about that because you're still having periods. She said, hormone testing is so hard to pinpoint, it doesn't make sense to draw hormones. What you should have had is your thyroid, which you did. Your thyroid function is normal. And so all of my numbers came back normal. That mattered. But the fact that she knew that I didn't need hormone testing to be put on hormone supplementation, I was like, somebody listens. And so then I started recommending her so much that now she has a wait list. So my apologies to anybody who's trying to get into her or her clinic staff. But within 2 weeks, I felt myself start to come back. I still have weight that I gained before the hormone patches, but I've stopped gaining. I'm fine with my weight right now. And I still, around that time of the month, get the sleeplessness a little bit. I might wake up one night with a hot flash. I have to go open a window, but it's not every day. It's not impacting my sleep so regularly that I'm a zombie. But it also reminded me that nothing is 100% effective. I still have irregular periods. The bleeding isn't as heavy, but I do have my cycles all over the place. And that's what happens in early perimenopause. And that's the answer that they are giving me to that would be inserting an IUD, which for my own personal reasons and my history of C-sections, I'm not ready to make that step yet, especially when there's no guarantee that it's going to actually help with irregular bleeding. So if it's not a guarantee, I'm not really ready to do it. I might be down the road, but right now I'm okay. But it reminded me that nothing is a magic bullet. I do have to talk to her regularly about readjusting. I had a follow-up and we talked about my dosing. And that's going to be an ever-going conversation. And lifestyle makes such a huge difference. We went on a trip and I drank a lot of cocktails and my sleep was trash. And my resilience to stress has diminished. And that is just something that comes with this period of life. But I recognized how important it was in advocating for myself, in fighting for my own care, that everyone should have access. And living where I live and knowing what's available to our community, you're either on a wait list for a really long time or you're driving 2 hours to get a doctor to talk to you. And now that these telehealth nurse practitioners are opening practices, this care is becoming more of an opportunity and an option for women. But a lot of women don't know that this is available to them. And a lot of women are still stuck in the same office with the same OB-GYN who delivered their baby 17 years ago that doesn't read the latest menopause health research. And I decided that menopause coaching and menopause care was going to be where I focused my time on, not just because it's the boat I'm in and I'm learning about my own body and how to take care of myself, but there's so many more women out there like me. And there are so many topics that nobody starts having a conversation around. But when the conversation gets started, they've all got something to say. And so I want to start that conversation. I want to be an advocate for women and women's health, but I also want women to be their own advocate. I want women to feel empowered to ask the right questions, to say this doctor no longer suits my needs and find care that is a better option for them. I want to help nurse practitioners and providers understand the research from 20 years ago that set us back into the stone age of hormone therapy. I want to remind women to rest, to put things down, prioritize themselves, which we don't. Understand that focusing on nutrition doesn't mean going on a diet. When I stopped looking at nutrition as a way to stay small and started looking at it as a way to have energy through the day and to build a body that will keep me active in my 70s and 80s, food became totally different. It stopped being the enemy. And I started looking at food as, sometimes I use this description, this metaphor. If you think about building a Lego house, but you don't have any Legos, you need food. You need the building blocks to build the body. And so women need to eat more. And we need to have conversations around eating more. We also need to have conversations around not being small, around our sexual health. I was having a conversation with someone recently about the fact that when Viagra came out, men didn't like the word impotence. It was a harsh word, made them feel bad about themselves. So they changed it to erectile dysfunction. But up until recently, women were being told they had ovarian insufficiency and vaginal atrophy instead of saying the genitourinary symptoms of menopause. GSM is what you'll see in a lot of research these days, but it's still out there. We still talk about vaginal atrophy. The idea that we are literally shriveling up and dying inside is okay. But if we used penile atrophy as a topic of conversation, that wouldn't fly. Right? We'd be rewriting the narrative. So it's time that we rewrite the narrative for women. It's time that there are places for women to go, to be heard, to ask questions, to have a community, because all humans need community. But I feel like women especially really thrive when we find our tribe. And I think back to stories of long, long ago when we lived in huts and the men were the hunters, and they would go off and they would hunt our food. They'd be gone. But you know what? The women, they raised the children and they took care of the village. So that's what we need to do with each other now. We need to take care of the village, because when we start taking care of the village, we all have space to thrive, and we all have a place to come home to and a place to grow. And so, yeah. That's why I wanted to start this podcast. I want to have those conversations. So now that I'm turning 44 on July 16th, I'm embracing. I've gone through many variations of feelings around my hormonal state and aging. There's feelings of invisibility and irrelevance. There's deep insecurity around physical appearance that creep in. I say this often, I don't want to be 25 again, but I sure as heck wouldn't have a problem with having my 25-year-old body back. That body I used to hate and pick apart and destroy. If I could have it again, I would nurture and take such better care of it. And I wouldn't cover up. I wouldn't rock around naked, but I wouldn't cover up. I drop the turtlenecks and the one-piece bathing suits. As I get more into midlife, this is my last year before the next age grouping on a survey jump. 45, I think, is the next one. So like right now I'm in the 35 to 44. Then I really become irrelevant, right? That's the we don't really care about your opinion category, which I find interesting because we're the consumers. We have the buying power. We have the money. We have the stability. Why are you thinking that we're irrelevant? That's a topic for another day. Maybe we'll have a conversation about irrelevance. But I was reading a book on menopause and someone was talking about how liberating it is to no longer catch the eye of a man walking down the street, and how it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't. And while catcalling is appalling and, irritating, I don't want to fade into the background. And as I have daughters growing up and they're teenagers now, I got one in high school. She's got 3 more years before she's off to college. There's this opportunity of youth that you see in your kids and you want amazing things for them. I want her to explore. I want her to have adventure. I want her to really find passion and purpose and not just take the easy road in college and get a career and get out and go to work and get married and have 2.5 kids and a minivan. And if that's what she wants, but she needs to discover that. We were talking about traveling abroad and what kind of career would make her happiest. And I think as we sit in our midlife as women, we aren't given the opportunity to have the acceptable midlife crisis, quote unquote, that the stereotypical buy a sports car, maybe get a toupee or dye your hair, maybe trade your spouse in for a newer model, whatever. Those are all those cliches that you see on TV, etc. The cliches around women in midlife is that they're crazy, they're nags, they're having meno rage, hot flashes, they don't want sex anymore. And it's just, we need to shift that narrative because inside we are having feelings of the next 40 years of my life. If I'm in my midlife, if I have 43, 44 more years of life, what do I want that to look like? What do I want this next 10 years to look like? And what could I have done differently in the last 20 years? I wouldn't say the first 40 because you're younger, crazy little kids, but how would I have done college differently? How would I have done my 20s and 30s differently? But also that now that I'm 43, I don't have the youth, the energy, the lack of responsibility to grant myself the space to really get to learn what makes me tick. So I am privileged to have this space so that I can have conversations with women about what makes us tick. And I can hopefully lead conversations with experts and other women so that you can take some time to think about what makes you tick. And we don't have to go softly into that good night, but we don't have to go in with a rage of fury either. I want us to in 20 years look back and say, gosh, we made it really so much easier for those of them coming up now. So when I was recording an episode, and that's one of the things that we had talked about, is that my 15-year-old, my 13-year-old, they'll be sitting at the counter and I'll be having a conversation with another woman about something that's just irking me about women's health or menopause or a topic I want to cover. And sometimes they'll roll their eyes like, oh, cringe, mom, like, ugh. But I hope in 20 years when they're 35, maybe 30 years from now, they can say, wow, those women did it. They started talking about it. They forced change. Mom was an advocate for other women to make it easier for them to get the care they needed. And so that's also why I'm doing this. The idea of a legacy of fighting for women's health and making us relevant. So I hope that you join me in having conversations around how crappy this might be sometimes, but also how much of a blessing this time of our lives can be. And I hope that if you don't have this conversation with me, you have a group of girlfriends or a counselor or a significant other or a mother that you can have these conversations with. Look for more episodes that are Chat on the Mat conversations if you're enjoying things that are this area focused. Of course, I'll have the clinical stuff. I'll have the experts. But I think these are going to be some really good conversations with women that unfold. And I can't wait to get into them because I love listening with not a myopic lens on life to hear what other people's experiences are and learn from them. Comment any questions you have. Please send them to me. I look forward to continuing these conversations in my free Facebook community called Women Mastering Midlife. And I can't wait to get into these episodes. I'm so excited about this season. I'm so excited to be doing this finally. It's been on my dream bucket list of things I want to do for 2 years now. I looked back and I was downloading how to start a podcast. I bought a book on Amazon 4 years ago. So now I feel like this is such a crowded space. Did I get in too late? What's the point? Who's going to listen? But I hope that you do. And I hope that you can take something on your journey with you. So until next time, have a good week, prioritize rest, and we'll be back soon. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll be back next week for another episode of Women Mastering Midlife. Until then, find us on Instagram at Women Mastering Midlife and join my free Facebook community, Women Mastering Midlife, to continue our discussions. If you have any questions that you'd like answered on an Ask Me Anything episode, send your emails to hello@missvictoriabird.com.